Because one day he was an attorney, an art dealer on the side, and he looked in the mirror and he saw, staring back at him, a 40-something-year-old man with a receding hairline. And yes, that is when he snapped. He snapped. And he became an aspiring writer. Because that is what you do when you snap. And in those 13 years, since he came out as a writer, he has written about subjects that no one else can or does or maybe even dares to, and he's done it with such dazzling effect. And when you're in a room with Henry Lien, you feel that you are flying with him. It's the only way I can describe it. His latest book is Spring, Summer, Asteroid, Bird, The Art of Eastern Storytelling. It's amazing. And it's out now. Everyone, please welcome Henry Lien. Woo!
After all of Carl's talk about droplets and trillions of tons of fungus. All right. Make this higher. Hi, I'm Henry Lien, and I am an author originally from Taiwan, now living in Hollywood, California. And my writing is actually known for the conflict in it. My first novel series is a fantasy called Pea Sprout Chen. And it's a story of a young woman who leaves her homeland to come to a new country to study at a boarding school that teaches a very unusual sport, combining figure skating with kung fu. And the New York Times described it as Hermione Granger meets Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, meets The Ice Capades, meets Mean Girls. But I'm actually less interested in conflict itself than in how different cultures treat conflict. My new book, Spring, Summer, Asteroid, Bird, The Art of Eastern Storytelling, explores the idea that cultural values dictate storytelling, including storytelling structures. As a way to illustrate how powerful cultural values can be, let's play a little game. I call this the game of lenses. I am going to use a very traditional East Asian storytelling lens, and I'm going to describe a book that is very well known here in the exotic Occident. And you're going to guess the book, okay? First book. Majestic Gold Dragon is murdered by band of thieves and homeless men. What book is this? Shout it out. The Hobbit. All right, let's autopsy that a little bit. If we're looking through this particular lens, the dragon's the best animal. It's divine, it's wise, it's benevolent, it's powerful, but it's peaceful. So any story in which a dragon is killed is automatically a tragedy. Further, if we're looking at this story through a very traditional and conservative East Asian lens, Bilbo and the dwarves would be seen as thieves and homeless men. And they would be seen as failed citizens, parasites upon society. And any story in which such elements triumph is automatically dark and wrong. Let's do another book. Faith-healing charlatan roams the empire, reanimating dead corpses and spawning a cult whose members drink his blood and eat his flesh. What book is this? All right, New Testament. Apologies to Jesus, whom I love and admire. Thank you, Jesus, for letting me use you as an example of how radically different cultural values can be and how they impact the stories that cultures tell, including stories about conflict. So most of us grew up in the Western storytelling tradition, specifically the Western three-act structure. And the three-act structure is focused on conflict. Further, it's symmetrical in shape, meaning that you have to introduce the main elements, the main characters, the protagonists, the antagonists, and the main conflict at the beginning of the story, and you've got to bring them back at the end of the story. And as a way to illustrate just how baked into our culture these aesthetics are, imagine if in the original film Star Wars, which we're supposed to call Episode 4, A New Hope, there was no Darth Vader, no Empire. Well, that wouldn't be Star Wars, that'd be Star. Or because there's no conflict. Imagine if in Romeo and Juliet, the entire first half of the play is about this guy named Romeo, and only about this guy named Romeo. And then after the halfway point, kapow! We get this new character introduced for the first time named Juliet. That wouldn't be Romeo and Juliet. That'd be Romeo then Juliet. So this illustrates how symmetry is also a value in Western storytelling. But in East Asian storytelling, there's an entirely different structure. It's a four-act structure, most known in the West by its Japanese name, Kisho Tenketsu. I'll say that more slowly. Kisho Tenketsu. And it is not based on conflict, and it is not symmetrical in structure. In fact, it is radically asymmetrical in that its defining feature is that it deliberately holds back a main element until after the halfway point. So the elements of this structure are Act 1, introduce the elements. Act 2, just develop those same elements, no rush, no hurry, gradually develop them. Act 3, drop an entirely new element into the story and see what chaos develops. Act 4, harmonize all of the elements. And by harmonize, I do not necessarily mean a peaceful resolution of whatever conflict might exist in the story. By harmonize, I mean map out the invisible interrelationships among all of the elements. Well, let me give you an example. There's a short story in my new book that shares a title with the book itself. And the short story is called Spring, Summer, Asteroid, Bird. In Act 1, we are introduced to the main characters, Chelsea and Marilyn. Chelsea is a bird, and Marilyn is a tyrannosaur. And they are distant cousins in the theropod family, which also includes A-lister Velociraptor. And Marilyn and Chelsea do not like each other. Act 2, develop those same elements. Chelsea lays her first clutch of eggs. Marilyn couldn't care less. Act 3, new element. Asteroid! An asteroid slams into the Earth. And the debris kicked up by the asteroid and the smoke from the wildfires that burned for years blot out the sun for years, ending most life on Earth. Act 4, harmonize all of the elements. Most dinosaurs die. However, Chelsea and other avian dinosaurs survive because they had beaks, which meant that they could eat seeds, which remain edible for years after the asteroid. So this story is not fundamentally about conflict. It's not about whether Chelsea's going to defeat Marilyn, whether Marilyn's going to defeat Chelsea, and it's not even about whether Marilyn and Chelsea are going to overcome their differences and team up to defeat the asteroid. No, it's about mapping the invisible relationships among all the things that were already here. The relationship between being tiny and being huge. The relationship between a beak and fangs. The relationship between eating seeds and eating meat. And Chelsea's seeming disadvantages turned out to be massive advantages that ensured her survival. Now, this might seem like a radical way to tell a story, too radical for Western audiences. However, there have been many works that have managed to Trojan horse this structure into Western audiences' hearts. Any fans of the novels of Haruki Murakami, especially Hard-Boiled Wonderland and The End of the World? Okay, 4-act structure. Any fans of the film Parasite by Bong Joon-ho? Okay, 4-act structure. Anyone here ever played a Nintendo Mario game? 4-act structure. So anyone who says that the 4-act structure is too avant-garde for Western audiences is apparently less avant-garde than tens of millions of American children. Now, these aesthetics don't come from nowhere. Cultural values, to some extent, dictate aesthetics, dictate storytelling structures, dictate the treatment of conflict in stories. And generally speaking, East Asian traditional culture is more collectivist than individualist. It's more concerned about the community than it is about any individual. And the 4-act structure reflects this cultural value in that it's not so concerned with whether one individual story element defeats another individual story element than it is about mapping out the relationships that we could not see among all of the elements, including the unexpected, unwelcome 3rd act element, and watching the elements establish a new equilibrium. And this can lead to a very different conception of conflict. And I believe in this. This rings very true to me because I've lived this story. I found myself in a story where I thought I was in conflict with death. But it turned out that there were some invisible things in my story. I didn't believe in soulmates until one day I met my soulmate. But we got a plot twist very early in our story. On the night that we met, he told me that he had stage 4 cancer. So from the beginning of our story, death was in our story, and we thought we were in a story about conflict with death. And we were the heroes, and death was the villain, and our job was to defeat the villain. Death was very determined to win this story, but I am also a very determined person. And when it became clear that my partner was not going to defeat the cancer, I refused to accept that because the time that we had together was so cruelly short, just 8 months. So I was an attorney at the time, and I used all of my logical and analytic powers to come up with a working, logical system to continue to talk to my partner after he died of cancer. And you can read about the details of that system on my website. And it all hinged on a precious password that I had him write and not show me. I had him write down a password on a piece of paper and then seal it up. And I would not open that password until after he died. And the plan was conceptually watertight. It was elegant. It was ingenious. And it was courageous. And it all went completely awry after he died. And I lost the ability to be able to use that password. And when that happened, it landed like a scorching asteroid in my world. And I thought I was going to be defeated by death. But there were some beautiful, invisible things that took me some time to see. I came to realize that when you love someone, and you feel their presence, you'll know it's them, and you don't need a password to know it. And on top of that, when you look in the face of someone you love, and you see the realization dawning on their face that you were using all of your effort, all of your strength, all of your ingenuity, all of your courage to stand down death itself for them, that look is immortal. And I would never have seen this if an asteroid didn't land in my story. So I thought I was in a story about conflict, but I didn't know I was in an East Asian 4-act story. And my partner and I did not defeat death, but that doesn't mean we didn't win. So I want to end on a more joyful note, because I'm a big fan of joy, and also of flying my freak flag high and proud. And one way that I am joyful and freaky is that I write theme songs for my books, and you're getting one tonight. I am not a musician. I am not a singer. I don't really know how to play this instrument, but I found that there are 4 chords hidden inside this instrument, and so I'm ready to go. I just chose this instrument because I thought it looked cool, because, yeah, I am that shallow. So that's my way of saying that this is not going to be very good. Please go easy on me. All right. Who's ready for some bad singing and even worse playing? I'm sorry, I'm almost 55 years old and kind of hard of hearing. Who's ready for some bad singing and even worse playing? I think I heard an affirmative. All right, hang on. Let's find those 4 chords. Okay, I'm ready to do this. Spring, then summer, then came the asteroid, then unfurled the end of the world. There was no spring or summer after the asteroid. Then was heard the sound of Chelsea loved to sing, serenade the spring, spread her feathers, be audacious. She's the queen of the Cretaceous. But our heroines, cousin Marilyn, she's ignoring Chelsea's chorus. She's a proud Tyrannosaurus. Once it was spring, then summer, then came the asteroid, then unfurled the end of the world. There was no spring or summer after the asteroid. Then was heard the sound of a bird. Summer saw no rest for stressed Chelsea in her nest, regurgitating hour after hour, 3 beaks gaping like flowers. Marilyn knew it and saw fit not to give a heck. She She's a mountain in a stream. She's got too much self-esteem. Space is vast, but I'm flying fast, fast inbound. Fate, here comes your fate at 58. Time's the speed of sound. Oh, 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 now every spring and summer after the asteroid bring a world of music unfurled. Now every spring and summer after the asteroid, Earth is stirred with symphonies of birds. Thank you. Thank you for sharing these ideas with me. The world is eternally full of discovery and new ideas, including new ideas about conflict. And they can be soul nourishing if we decide they're going to be. Thank you.